Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Jake with Fitness Insider coming at you guys with another good one today. But first, as always, hit that subscribe button, join the family. I would love to have you guys. So, because we don't really have any action going on in the bodybuilding world, I do my best to try not to get in any kind of drama situations, you know. Maybe I'll make an exception here or there, but I try to stick to competition coverage and, you know, the more important stuff. So, no comps right now, so obviously that's out the window. So what I am going to do is kind of go through maybe old contests, bodybuilder profiles, all this kind of stuff. But for the time being, for this video, this is going to be a part 2 to the mini-series that I got going on, which is going to be the best bodybuilders from each decade. In this particular fashion, we're going to be doing the 90s, the 2000s, and the 2010s. So, as I mentioned in the last video, because there's so many bodybuilders that I want to cover, I have to make this a mini-series. There's just too much to try to squeeze into a couple videos. So there's likely going to be several videos. If you guys got any input, you know, definitely let me know in the comments. I'll definitely try to include whoever you guys think deserves to be in these lists. And to keep these videos pretty watchable and small, I'm going to do 2 bodybuilders per decade for those 3 decades. And also, if you guys want to see something like maybe the 60s, 70s, and 80s, definitely let me know. I'll consider doing that as well. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this. Alright guys, in the last video I discussed Flex Wheeler and Dorian Yates, and I cannot go any further without actually bringing up Kevin Levrone. This guy is just amazing, man. He's a legend in the sport, super hard, dedicated, just driven bodybuilder. This guy, from what I understood, he trained like an animal, man, and we're going to get into a lot of the reasons why, but as you can look at his physique right now, I mean, the guy has some of the cleanest lines in bodybuilding history. He had a crazy tapered midsection. He always kept his midsection looking phenomenal. His legs were really good, especially from the beginning to the middle of his career. I mean, he started losing size, you know, as all bodybuilders do towards the end of their career. But, man, when this guy was at his prime, he was just almost unstoppable. And you look at the most muscular here. He literally has one of the top, best, most muscular of all time, probably shared with the likes of Rollie Winkler and Phil Heath, but he brings something special to it. I mean, look at the crazy shoulder size. The chest is just popping. The abs are always in control, and just his arms are phenomenal. His legs look phenomenal here. He has calves, so I mean, his traps popping out. Just almost a picture perfect most muscular. As you can see here, when he's doing this twisting double bicep, he definitely had a lot of mass to his back. Granted, he was going up against somebody like Dorian Yates, who has arguably the best back of all time, him and Ronnie Coleman. I mean, he still had a phenomenal back. He really had almost no weaknesses. Then you throw on top of all that the fact that he came back after over a decade hiatus from bodybuilding and came back looking phenomenal, as you can see here. Now, granted, he didn't place high when he came back, but still, I mean, he looked phenomenal, especially for his age and how long he took off. And that brings up the last point I want to make. The people that knew him, they said that he would make literally transformations. He would go from looking like he didn't even work out to looking like a freaking Mr. Olympia inside of a couple months. The people that know him and the people that know the industry say that they've never seen anybody respond to that kind of training and whatnot the way he did. This guy, his body could change in a flash, and for all those reasons, that is definitely why Kevin Levrone is a legend and deserves a spot on this list. Alright guys, and moving along, the next guy we're going to talk about from the 90s is Shaun Rayman. Man, this guy, while controversial, I think he's a really cool bodybuilder, man. Granted, he is outspoken, but as he should be. I think he made a lot of valid points, even when he was talking on controversial things. He did a lot in the name of bodybuilding and standing up for his, his fellow bodybuilders, trying to get more pay and better, just better everything for all the guys. He stood up to judges and really tried to change the sport for the better, and I really respect the guy for that. And when you really look at the physique, the dude's phenomenal. I mean, I'll go on record and say that if he was a little bigger, he probably would have been a Mr. Olympia. I have no doubt in that. I mean, I think that was the only thing that prevented him from tying down that Mr. Olympia. You know, standing next to somebody like Dorian, it made it really hard because he was getting outmassed by quite a bit. But when it really comes down to just the physique, you take away the mass difference, this guy probably had one of the best looking physiques of all time as far as aesthetics and lines and just, I mean, as you can see here, I mean, aesthetic just don't even quite describe it. The guy was a phenomenal poser, very 3D, full muscle bellies. I mean, almost perfect, right? And that's like basically what I was saying. If he was just a little bit bigger, he would definitely be he would have won several Olympias. I have no doubt about that, because he came in on every single time. This guy was basically like the modern Dexter Jackson. This guy he was on all the time. And then, like I said, you throw in the posing and you throw in the fact that the guy had almost zero weaknesses. He had a phenomenal back, very good arms, insane tapered midsection. His legs were definitely good and separated. They weren't massive and got the crazy sweep like a lot of modern bodybuilders have today. But for his time, the guy was almost unbeatable. As you can see here from the back, granted Dorian packed so much more mass and taper. Shawn was standing right next to him, and I mean, he was really pushing him, I think. I mean, granted, I still think Dorian's better from the back, but Shawn was right there. Phenomenal bodybuilder, definitely deserves a spot on this list. Alright guys, switching decades, we're going to go into the 2000s. So, in the last video, I talked about Jay Cutler and Ronnie Coleman, and today I'm going to talk about Dexter Jackson. This dude is a living legend. The guy is still competing at the highest ranks. I mean, he's been running the sport for so long, decades, right? Just been in the winning circle for so long. It's funny enough that I bring him up after Shaun Ray, because while I'm not really so keen on talking about the drama, I'm not really about that, but I will bring it up because it is current, I guess. These two have been squabbling and whatnot, and while there's a lot of shots being taken at each other, the main thing that these guys are discussing is who would place where in which era, and that really boils down to these guys talking about who would beat who in their prime. I've seen a lot of people on both sides. I personally think Dexter would take Shaun, and that's nothing against Shaun. Shaun's a phenomenal bodybuilder, of course. I just personally think Dexter is better. The guy is bigger too, and he's not bigger in a sloppy way. Dexter's one of the cleanest. He has one of the cleanest lines in aesthetics, just like Shaun does, but with added mass. So I mean, right there and then, I mean, the guy's wider too. So he has a lot of attributes that would go against beating Shaun. And on top of that, because the guys were both conditioned, right? There's nothing against Shaun, because both of these guys were known for bringing the conditioning every time. But moving back, just talking about Dexter, he's known as the Blade. The guy is on every single time. Being off for Dexter is still somebody else's 97%. The guy is shredded every time. And when he's really on, he's almost untouchable. He has the crazy conditioning on top of the width that he has, the taper that he has, man, the round 3D muscles that he has. And like I said, man, he's just a living legend. The guy has won more pro shows than anybody. He's won more Arnold Classics than anybody. And he has a Mr. Olympia title under his belt. I mean, what more can you say about the guy? If you want to even take it outside of the profession, the guy has one of the coolest personalities I've seen in bodybuilding. Super well loved by fans and colleagues in the sport. He's just, again, man, he's a GOAT. He's one of the best of all time. He's one of my top 3 favorite bodybuilders. He is retiring after this year. I think he said the Olympia will be his last show. I think he is kind of discussing about doing the Athleticon afterwards, but there's really nothing that I've heard recently that would say that he is doing it. But either way, after this year, he says he's retiring, so it's definitely going to be a sad day when that happens. But yeah, phenomenal bodybuilder, one of the best of all time, Dexter Jackson. Alright guys, we're going to move right along and talk about Victor Martinez. As you can see here, the dude was phenomenal. I mean, he had the mass, the lines, and the condition. I mean, he was definitely, I wouldn't call him a mass monster like Ronnie or Jay was, but he was right up there with the mass. I mean, obviously Jay Cutler was a bigger bodybuilder, but Victor was by no means small. I mean, the dude had almost the perfect amount of mass and condition to keep his lines clean, his midsection clean, and his taper was amazing. the guy was amazing. I would say the biggest problem with Victor was the fact that he had so many issues in his life that kept him from really truly being at the top for a long time. And I'm not going to go too much into the personal stuff because I don't really want to talk about that here. That's his personal life, but I'm sure you could find out if you wanted to. But beyond that, had he not run into any issues, the guy would have definitely probably I guess I can't say for sure, but in my mind, I think this guy would have been a Mr. Olympia winner. Just because, I mean, the guy, he had everything. He had the arms, he had the midsection, he had the legs, both hamstrings and quads. So from the front and the back, his legs looked phenomenal. He had calves. His back was phenomenal. I mean, the guy had zero flaws. He had the width, had the taper, and he just had the look. As you can see here, in 2007, this was the closest he got. This was actually one of the most controversial outcomes in any Mr. Olympia. Definitely the top two most controversial. As you can see here, Victor had the cleaner lines in the better condition. Jay outmassed him and had decent enough conditioning. It was definitely one of Jay's most off years, I will say that. So a lot of people came out of this contest very upset, saying that Victor was the clear winner. I will say this. I know that mass was weighed a little bit more heavily back then than it is now. And then you have the fact that, I don't want to call it politics, but let's just say that, you know, they always err on the side of the Mr. Olympia, the returning Mr. Olympia. They gave them a little bit of bonus points, you know. I think that's probably what happened the most, because had it went to Victor, you could not be upset, because Victor clearly was on. He was probably the best look of his whole career in 2007. So had he won, nobody would have complained. In fact, a lot of people think it should have went that way. Again, I think I have no problem with Jay winning it, because Jay was the bigger bodybuilder, and I don't think Jay was as bad as people say he was, but he definitely was off for Jay. So either way, it's in the past, but Victor definitely goes down as one of the better bodybuilders from the 2000s, and even moving on to the 2010s. You know, a lot of these guys, they made a lot of their career from mid-2000s to the mid-2010s. So I kind of pick and chose where I wanted to put them based on the prime of their career. So that's why I put Victor in the 2000s, even though he's still competing to this day. Okay, guys, and switching decades, for the last time, we're going to talk about the 2010s. And, of course, I'm going to start off with Shawn Rhoden, man. Shawn Rhoden is a phenomenal bodybuilder, and a lot of times I don't think he gets enough credit. I don't think he gets the credit that he deserves. We'll get into that in a little bit, but first let's talk about the physique, all right? Shawn Rhoden definitely is, when you talk about mass monsters and the aesthetic guys, he definitely is more on the aesthetic guys kind of list. Rather, he's kind of both, because especially recently, the guy carries around quite a bit of mass. I think in the last Olympia, he was somewhere in the 250s. So, I mean, the guy is not small. He has a lot of mass on his body. He has some of the best legs ever. I mean, he has phenomenal legs. And while they may not be the biggest of all time, they just have like the best, the sweep to the quads, man, and the hamstrings and the glutes. He has some of the best shaped legs. And the fact that they're feathered in the quads is just very, very good legs on the guy. World class for sure. Throw in probably the best abs and thighs of all time. As far as I can see, it's one of the best. He has a phenomenal abs and thighs. I mean, stand him next to anybody that has a awesome midsection. Shawn Rhoden's probably going to tank him, dude. And as you can see here, 2017 was probably his biggest. I think a lot of these guys were trying to come up against somebody like Big Ramy. They knew he was climbing in ranks. They knew they probably had to bring a bigger size. And a lot of these guys really tried to size up for that show. And even with the extra size, he looked phenomenal. However, 2018 was definitely the pinnacle of his career. I mean, the physique that he brought to 2018, amazing. And this is where I was talking about that he don't get enough credit. I mean, the guy was about as ripped as you could get. Phenomenal conditioning. And then you talk about the lines, man. If you have a guy who's really aesthetic, and then you throw on quite a bit of mass and crazy conditioning, you have a winning package right there. And it just so happened that Phil Heath probably brought one of the lesser physiques that he's brought. I don't want to really dog it, because his conditioning was still great. I don't. A lot of people say Phil Heath in 2018 was off. He wasn't off. He might have been off for Phil, but I mean, his hamstrings were shredded as much as you could ever shred your hamstrings. I mean, the dude was on. But I will say this: his midsection was out of control. That was clearly one of the bigger reasons why he probably lost. But even on top of that, I mean, the lines of Phil Heath that year, they just didn't look good. And I don't know if his midsection, besides the distension, it just looked blockier. It looked wider. So I'm guessing that contributed to his loss. But going back to Shawn, man, because I've heard the expression that Shawn didn't win, Phil lost, basically saying that Shawn only won because Phil didn't come in like he should have. I don't believe that, man. I think Shawn deservingly won that Olympia. I think he looked phenomenal. He went all out, prepared hard, and came in looking phenomenal. And again, I'm not going to get into the personal issues. That's not what this is about. We'll see what happens there. But if he's able to return, I think he still has at least a few years of being in that winning circle, being right up there challenging for the Olympia. So I really do hope, if everything goes okay and whatnot in his personal life, I really do hope we can see him up on stage again, because if we can see something like that 2018 Olympia, or even a better version, I mean, that would be a sight to see. So Shawn Rhoden definitely takes one of the better bodybuilders of the 2010s. Alright guys, this is the last bodybuilder, and now when it comes down to my personal top 3 favorite bodybuilders, it would have to be Dexter Jackson, Jay Cutler, and then this guy, Rollie Winkler, man. I love Rollie Winkler. This guy is probably the freakiest bodybuilder of all time in my book. When you weigh in everything, man, I guess I can't say of all time, but he's definitely the freakiest bodybuilder of this time. I mean, pound for pound, the guy is just insane. I don't think you could pack more muscle on a guy of his size. Just definitely, earlier when I spoke of the best, most muscular poses, this guy probably takes the cake for the best, most muscular. And as you can see here, when he won the Arnold Classic Australia a couple years ago, that was probably the best improvement I've ever seen anybody do on their midsection. He went from being probably the worst offender of the bubble gut to having one of the best midsections among the mass monsters. I mean, look at the taper on this guy. It is seriously one of the craziest tapers of a mass monster. And the conditioning that he brought, he beat guys like Dexter Jackson and William Bonac. It was a phenomenal showing for this guy. But when he comes in big, this guy is big. He has literally probably the best arms of all time. And just biceps, triceps, his forearms are crazy. His shoulders are massive, big chest. Now, I will say this. I think the biggest thing holding him back from winning an Olympia, which he definitely can do, I think after seeing what he did in 2018, I think that basically put him on the radar. Everyone really looked for him in 2019 to win the Olympia. He didn't come in at his best, so he didn't do well. But the dude is capable, and the reason I say that he may not do it is because of his conditioning, man. That is the biggest thing that he seems to struggle with. He might come in for 2 or 3 shows looking phenomenal. 2018, he did phenomenal all year, and 2019, not so much. He just kind of missed the mark, both with the Arnold and with the Olympia. So the guy needs to kind of figure out how to go about dieting, and with him, it may not even be the diet, because I've seen a lot of pictures right before the show where he looks shredded. It might be the carb up process. I don't know if there's last-minute mistakes happening before he hits the stage. Who knows what's going on? But if the guy can dial in his conditioning and then also maybe bring up his lower back a little bit, the guy would be untouchable. He has phenomenal features, and now that he brought his midsection in, he's just almost unstoppable, man. Imagine if this guy had a better lower back. Who could beat him? Especially with somebody like Phil Heath kind of in like a semi-retired state. If Phil Heath ain't coming back, Rollie Winkler could beat Brandon Curry. And I don't say that softly, because Brandon Curry is phenomenal, but Rollie Winkler has better legs than Brandon and just as much muscle upstairs, probably more. So the guy is just... he has all the potential in the world to be a future Mr. Olympia, but he is getting older every single year, so he definitely needs to kind of dial it in if he wants to have a Sandow under his belt. But anyways, guys, yes, Rollie Winkler is one of the freakiest guys for his size, definitely of this time, and cool personality. He's loved by all the fans. He's just a phenomenal bodybuilder, and I expect big things from him still. But anyways, guys, that just about does it for my video. Those are the 6 competitors. I'm going to go ahead and pick another 6 for the part 3. If you guys want any input on that, definitely let me know in the comments what you think. Yeah, thanks to everybody that stuck around through the video. I appreciate you guys. If you like this kind of thing, definitely subscribe. I'm going to keep more of this kind of content coming. Again, thank you. I will see you in the next one.